everyone. This is Don Smith, and I would like to welcome you to the February 2025 Tip of the Month. And I've been traveling quite a bit for the past 3.5 weeks. I started out, left California on January 25th to fly to Iceland for my annual workshop that I co-teach with Gary Hart in Iceland, our Iceland Winter Workshop. And we had a fantastic group of participants as always, and got 2 nights of Northern Lights. One night was unexpected. We thought it was going to be cloudy, and it turned out to be the best night of the whole trip. So you just never know. And Gary and I are going to be making an announcement here shortly about our 2026 Iceland workshop. And I think we're going to offer you guys a few surprises. So be paying attention. And as soon as we get that together, we will be getting it out to you. From there, I left and flew to Rome, where I met up with my wife, Barry, and some longtime family friends, Jamie Panger and her son, Andrew. And we just had a terrific time. It was just Barry and I in Rome. We kind of did the standard tourist things, you know, the Colosseum and the Vatican, what have you. And then we took a train up to Siena. And if any of you ever get a chance to go to Italy, I highly recommend Siena. Just a great little town built on a hill. You are either walking uphill or downhill, but it's just a fabulous place to visit. But enough of that. I was thinking on the long airplane rides home what I wanted to talk to you about this month. And it came up, my idea was to talk to you about super wide angle lenses. Here I have the Sony 12 to 24 f2.8 super wide. And I would kind of consider anything 24, even 20 or less down to 12. And we even have lenses out now at 10 millimeter that are rectilinear lenses. And this is a 14 millimeter fixed focus. It's a 1.8. I use this a lot for night photography. But I find myself really with that 12-24 f2.8. And what I find in my workshops is that I think it's a lens or lenses or a range of focal lengths that really kind of stymies people. They just don't seem 100% certain on how to use these lenses. And that's what I want to go through today with a lot of examples of just my own work and 7 bullet points, kind of a rough summary, if you will, of what I think about when I'm putting on one of these super wide angle lenses. So let's get to it. The first thing I would say, and this is probably the most important thing I could tell you, is to find an enticing foreground element that is in harmony with your background. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at some images here. This was probably the first, I won't say probably, this was the first super telephoto I ever got in my hands. And this is way back in the day when I was shooting Canon, before Sony ever really even came onto the scene. And I was sent this 11 to 24 when it very first came out. This is a place called Fremont Peak in kind of in the Monterey Bay area. In fact, you're looking out over that fog where the sun is setting. That is the Monterey Bay. And just kind of a really cool area to go photograph. And I had this idea of mine to hike up onto the peak and just get really wide. And, I think this is the first thing I want to teach you or give you a lesson in, is try to fill up that foreground as best you can. Make that foreground very dramatic. Here's one that I just did recently before I left on my trip. And this is with a 12 mil. This is with my Sony A7R5. And I just hiked on these dunes. A friend and awesome photographer in this area named Amy Joseph. You guys ought to go check her out. and she gave me directions on how to kind of shortcut my way into these dunes. These are the Oceana Dunes, south of Pismo Beach area. And I got over to about the third or fourth dune and just found some pristine dunes, and then just had this incredible sky that you can see where the clouds were going to get lit, but I didn't know if that sun was going to hit that opening out there. You can see I had a bank of clouds and fog on the horizon, but thankfully it did, and this is one of my favorite images that I've created thus far in 2025. 12 mil on this shot to get a lot of that dune in the shot. Here's one from Torres del Paine in Chile, and this was on a workshop that Ron Madra and I used to teach down there. And this is again a 12 to 24 lens, and this is at 18 mil. And we saw these bright red flowers on these bushes, and it was just a natural. You had the glacial melt in the lakes back behind it, and then the dramatic Paine Range back there. And I just got up close to kind of really fill up that foreground with 18 mil. Now here's one closer to home. This is probably about 2 minutes outside my front door. And this was taken with an iPhone with a really wide angle lens on the iPhone 14. I've since upgraded to the 16 Max. And, sometimes you just go with the camera you had, and I don't hesitate to shoot my iPhone in RAW mode. And the light started to shape up, and I scrambled around and then found these colorful flowers for a foreground element. Once again, if you're shooting iPhone, follow along with what you would do if you were shooting with your larger camera, and just think about filling the frame and getting up close. Another one from Iceland. This wasn't this year's Iceland. This was from last year, and we just had, this was for a sunset shot, and we had this beautiful sun off the camera left that was lighting up these warm grasses atop the black sand dunes and kind of painting the light on Vesterhorn Mountain back there. And so you can see 16 mil, again with the 12 to 24 mil lens, and kind of let that leading line of that first dune just help to bring the viewer's eye into the frame. Another thing, or another thought on using super wides, you would use it when you need a lot of real estate in your composition. For an example, for horizontal, either left or right, or top to bottom for a vertical. So let's go back to Torres del Paine. I can remember this. This was a scouting trip that Ron and I did, and we got up very early and drove into the park in the dark, and it was stormy. We couldn't even see the mountains, and then right at sunrise, the storm started to clear. We got a full rainbow, and I captured this at 17 millimeter. This is when I had my first 12 to 24 Sony, which was an f4. I do have to say the 12 to 24 2.8 is very much sharper. Not night and day, but it's a sharper lens, but it is a heavier lens to have to carry also. Here is one from this year's trip in Iceland. And I'm going to blank on the name of these falls. Skutafoss. I actually have it up there on the top left. 12 mil. You can see 3 waterfalls coming into one area, and a lot of the group was shooting from below, and some of us went above. Had to be very careful on this rock because I did not have my crampons on. They were back in the van, and I didn't want to slip and go right down into the water. I think it would have been not a pleasant experience. But once again, I needed wide, and I utilized the lines of the rock that I was standing on to kind of frame these falls. And then I made sure the river I captured as much as I could right up to the background of the mountains back there and the beautiful sky. So when we go vertical, we got to think the same way. This is a little bit of a misbow at night. And this is up in Lower Yosemite in Yosemite National Park. I wanted to pick up some of those stars up on top. There weren't a lot. And I also found this area down on the bottom right where I knew if I went with a slow exposure, and you could see I went 30 seconds at f2.8, that I would get a lot of blur in the water, and the moon was bringing out the highlights on that water. This is another one where we're using the ice bubbles. This is Skogafoss waterfall and the river. This was a couple of years ago, and I really owe this to my buddy Albert Dross, who was co-teaching with Gary and I. He co-taught 3 workshops, I believe, with us, and he knew of this area where the ice bubbles were and called me over. And again, you can see 14 mil. And, you know, so you show up on these locations and you go, well, that's a beautiful waterfall, but is there something I can put with it? And Albert had been out there on a previous workshop and had known of these ice bubbles. And fortunately, I was in the area and he called me over and I made an image I really, really like. So another thing, when skies are dramatic, you want to feature them. This was an old Ansel Adams saying that I've never forgotten. And when the skies are really beautiful with clouds and light, feature them. This is a horizontal. This is Montana de Oro State Park near to where I live in Morro Bay. This is down near Los Osos Baywood area. It's a beautiful state park, probably my favorite state park in the area to photograph. And I'm out there quite regularly. And you can see when I saw this cloud formation start to catch light, I had a gorgeous foreground with the rock shelves there in the foreground, and I really wanted to feature that sky. So I made sure I wasn't doing a complete symmetrical. I broke it and I gave a little less to the foreground and a little more to the sky, and then just let the light do its thing. Here's another one. This would be on the far end of what I'd call a super telephoto. This is 24 mil. And this was a tilt shift that I used to own. And I'm kind of kicking myself that I sold these, but this was back in my Canon day. Unfortunately, Sony doesn't make any tilt shifts. And I'm not so sure camera manufacturers are much anymore, because we can replicate a lot of this with focus stacking nowadays and software. But this is back where we could change the plane of the lens to get everything very sharp from front to back. And even though I went at f16, a lot of times you could do this at a lesser aperture. But again, it's featuring the beautiful patterns in the sand and that strong diagonal dominant line. It's not a perfect diagonal by any means. It's got some bend to it. But let's let it take the viewer's eye up into that gorgeous sky. And I believe this was a sunrise in the direction I'm shooting. That sun had not crested the horizon yet back there, but it was enough to get under these clouds and light them up. Another lens, excuse me, that we don't see much of these days are fisheye, what we called fisheye lenses. This was a Canon 15 millimeter fisheye that I had adapted over for my Sony. And this was up in the Bristlecone Pines up above Bishop, California. And I saw this stormy sky and then these 4 trees on the horizon. 2 of them bristlecone. I'm not so sure if the 2 trees to the right are bristlecone. They probably are, but one of them could be a pine. I'm just a pine tree. I'm not sure. But I just trying to do this with a rectilinear 15 mil. It just didn't have the drama. And then I thought, you know, I've got this fisheye in the bag. I'm going to try this. And we didn't get a lot of color in the clouds. As you can see, this was about the extent of the color that we got. But there was a lot of beautiful texture in those clouds. And I just thought the frame was very interesting by going very wide. Okay, another thing to think about when you're using super wide angle lenses, get eye to eye with your foreground elements. And that usually means getting low. Poppies. I love shooting poppies. This is out on a trail south of where I live here called the Point Bouchon Trail. It's just north of Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant. And I just happened to see some pictures that somebody posted on social media yesterday. And the poppies are starting to come into bloom out there. I would say in about another week, it's going to be really, really good. And I'll be back out there. But that's just the ocean back behind us there. And the field, the trails up to my top right. And I just laid down. I believe I handheld this shot. It may have been on a tripod. Let me see, 1/125th. I'm guessing I was hand holding this shot, but I was eye to eye with those poppies, putting the emphasis on the poppies. Here's another spring flower shot. This was from last spring. We've had two really good springs out at Carrizo Plain National Monument. That's east of San Luis Obispo area. And this isn't quite all the way into Carrizo Plain, but it's along the way. And I knew of this area where there was a lot of flowers. And this was actually after the sun had set, but there was just still enough color up in the sky to hold a little bit of pink in those clouds against the bluish of the sky. And once again, I got very low. I think I was on a tripod here, and 12 mil. And it was a very calm evening. You can see I shot at 1/13 of a second, f10, and I might have focus bracketed these. I'm not 100% sure, but really ended up liking the image. Let's move along to an image I did, I don't know, a number of years ago. This might have been before COVID, actually, in New Zealand. Gary Hart and I had done our New Zealand workshop that we do every June, which is their winter because they're in the southern hemisphere. And this was an area up near Twizel, Mount Cook National Park area. And everything had just frozen from that morning. And when we got up there, we were fortunate that everything had remained frozen. And we were all scrambling. I believe there was 10 or 12 in the group, plus Gary and I. So we had, 12 to 14 people out there wandering around. And I just happened to catch, I love these willows against the blue sky and the mist. That's actually a river or a pond behind that. But again, I challenged myself, find that foreground element. Where's that foreground? And when I came across these red berries, I just went, wow, that was it. Got eye to eye with them and created this image. Another one, this is from up in Oregon on Cannon Beach. I believe the sun had set. Gary and I were already soaked. We didn't bring along any waders or anything. We were already up to our hips soaked. So I just set the tripod in the water and kind of got low and just let the approaching wave come on me and shot right through it and wiped down the lens and waited for another wave. And it was really kind of cool to just get the drama. If you can get low and get eye to eye, you can get whatever drama, in this case, moving water, and emphasize it. Okay, don't hesitate to use super wide angle lenses for astrophotography. This is, I can finally say the cat's out of the bag. When Sony had yet to put out the 12 to 24 f2.8, they had gotten a hold of both Gary and I, who are artisans, and said, would you guys be willing to test these lenses but not let anybody in your group know what you are doing? So this was actually, I want to say this was the night before the workshop began, and I got down to Bandon Beach, which is down off the bluffs from our hotel. and I went out in the dark. Obviously, there was no moon up or anything. What's lighting the rocks is actually from some buildings that are up on the bluff behind me. And you can see this was a 15-second exposure, but this was my first go with the 12 to 24 lens, and needless to say, I was hooked with this lens when I saw how sharp it was and what I could do with it. So Astro Shot at 12 mil. This is one that was done at 14 mil. I believe this was either last year or the year before in Ron Madra and my Joshua Tree workshop, where we actually still have one opening. We had somebody that had to back out of the workshop. We're looking for somebody to fill it. You're going to be able to do shots like this. We go out for 4 nights. One night is star photography, where we're doing pinpoint stars. That's usually the first night. Then we do 2 nights of Milky Way, and we do a night even where we do a timed exposure. And that's what this one was. I believe this was about 22 minutes. You could work out the seconds there. 1,079 seconds. And I did a little bit of depth of field here because I could make it work with the time exposure that I was doing. But again, 14 mil. And I didn't really notice it, but down on the bottom left, those grasses that are sticking up vertically, that just really, I almost wish I would have went the full 12, but it was what it was. And we were pointing, you can see, at the North Star. Another one, this is a Aurora shot we did a couple of years ago in Iceland with Albert as our tour leader, and he was also teaching. If you've never had a chance to work with Albert, he's an awesome guy, awesome teacher, and a great photographer, and just a really solid person. Can't say enough nice things about Albert. Okay, let's look at a couple more before we wrap this up. Lying down is a great way to add emphasis to your foregrounds. Now remember, I showed you one that was eye to eye, but what if we took the camera and either took it off the tripod, as I did here, or just flatten your tripod. This is why I like buying tripods without center columns, so I can do things like this, get very low to the ground. But as good as these cameras are getting now, with their high ISO and our noise reduction programs like Topaz Photo AI, I can shoot up to 12,800 and get really clean looking images. So I don't hesitate now to handhold. I was laying down on this, either laying down with it on a tripod or hand holding it, or possibly even just resting the lens on a little rock. I can't remember exactly how I got down this low, but I was lying down. Another one here, this is just right outside my door. And I'm shooting back at Morro Rock. You can kind of see a little bit of an outline of it to the right of the Sun Star. And I actually got a double Sun Star because I got a reflection off of Morro Bay. And these are just sea lavenders. And this was shot with that 12-24-2.8 Sony at 12 mil. Another one. Now this one is out in Carrizo Plains. This was when 2 years ago, in 2023, we just had in a tremendous super bloom, and there was just flowers everywhere. I'm not so sure we're going to get it this year. We just haven't had enough rain, and more importantly, we haven't had enough early rain. Okay, my last tip, and is that although you have a ton of depth of field, when you're using a super wide angle lens, don't be afraid to use focus stacking if you need it. Now, the 3 pictures I'm going to show you here were all done before I got my Sony a7R5. So I was just manually focusing maybe 3 bracket points. I know this is one at 12 mil. Even though I was at f10, I wanted to make sure I had the bottom. Then I focused for the middle, and then I focused out to the clouds. And you can put these together in Photoshop, but I highly recommend a little program called Helicon Focus, and get the Pro version. It's a lifetime license. I got away from focus stacking a couple of years ago, and when I got back into it, mine was out of date, and I just went on the site, downloaded the updated version, and there was no issues at all. And I've had the license for this focus stacking software for probably 12 years. Helicon, Helicon Focus. Here's another one that I did where I just did a couple of manual focuses. This might have just been one for the trees and one for the background. And one thing I want to tell you, you can see this is 15 mil. I'm shooting up towards El Cap, and I've got some rectilinear problems with the trees, or you would think it's a problem on the two black oaks to either side, the left or right. But I actually happen to like how they're leaning in and kind of framing El Capitan. So don't always be so quick to rush into your lens correction tool and try to fix that. I think in this instant, it actually worked. And I actually took this image and went into the lens correction and did not like the results I was seeing. So you are going to get rectilinear and perspective shifts when you angle super wides up or down, and you can, pretty much after the fact go into software and try it both ways. Last image I want to show you was just it probably was a three-step focus bracket, and this was early dawn at the famous Wanaka tree. And this is a stop we feature usually both for sunset and sunrise on our New Zealand trip, which is going to be in June this year. And had this moon, and it was hazy back up there in the clouds. You can see the lake level was very low this year. This is only the second time in all the years we've been going over there that the water wasn't up over the base of the tree there. And so you go with what's dealt you. And I came up on this frame and I just saw, that's kind of cool where I got the reflection of the tree. So I did a little bit of bracketing just to make sure everything was sharp. And even though that was a cloudy sky, I did have those trees going down the left side that was sharp and the mountains in the background. So there you go. There's some tips, 7 different tips on how I think about using super wide angle lenses. The cool thing in Lightroom, if you use Lightroom, you can go in under your metadata. And if you're using super wides, you can go in and just do a search on how many images you've shot over however many years you've had super wide. I think one of the things for me personally, looking at my images, is I love using super wides. And I think as I'm getting older and progressing with my photography, I'm finding myself looking for more and more opportunities to use super wides. I like going on one side or the other, super wides or telephoto, and maybe one of these videos I'll show you we'll do something similar on the telephoto side for landscape. So anyway, I hope this has helped you out, and it's nice to be home and be back in my own bed, I can tell you that. My next workshop won't be until the end of March, the last week in March, and again, we do have one opening. Just shoot me an email, don@donsmithphotography.com, or you can go on my website, donsmithphotography.com, and check it out. It's an awesome workshop that we do out there in Joshua Tree, and hopefully you can snag that last spot. So until next month, you guys get out, get taking your pictures, stay creative. As I always tell you, it's great for the soul. We'll see you then.